Right now, as you're watching this, your brain is doing something extraordinary. It's not waiting to see what happens next. It already has a prediction about whether you're safe, about whether this is worth your energy, about whether the chair you're sitting in is comfortable, about whether the temperature in the room is right, and about whether your body has enough fuel for the next hour. All of that before you've consciously thought a single thing. You're not driving your nervous system. Your nervous system is much of the time running way ahead of you. And once you understand that, the symptoms that have felt so confusing start to make a different kind of sense. Welcome back. I'm Julie and this is Behind the Behaviour. This is part 2 of our Invisible Illness series. In the last video we talked about the gap between what tests can measure and what the body is actually doing. And in this video we're going to go inside the brain, not in a medical textbook way, this is actually what's happening and it makes sense when you see it way. Because I think the brain has had some very bad PR for a long time and it deserves better. You deserve better. For a long time, and this is genuinely how many of us were taught to think about it, the brain was described as reactive. Something happened, brain receives the signal, brain responds, like a very sophisticated answering service. But researchers, particularly in fields like neuroscience and cognitive science, have increasingly found that the picture is incomplete. The brain doesn't just react, it predicts constantly, every single second. It's running a continuously large, unconscious simulation of the world. And if your body's place in it before anything has actually happened. Now, here's why this matters. Prediction takes resources, it takes energy, and prediction is shaped by experience, by what has happened before, by what the brain has learned to expect. If you've been through periods of high stress, the brain logs that. If you've been through illness, the brain logs that. If your body has spent a long period working very hard just to keep things stable, the brain begins to predict that the world is demanding and that the body may not have enough resources. And here's the really important part. A prediction isn't always conscious. You don't sit there and decide, I think today will be exhausting. The brain has already run that calculation based on history, based on what's been happening in the body, based on 1,000 signals you haven't consciously registered, and it may have already begun to respond accordingly. This isn't imagination. This is biology. For a long time, and this is genuinely how many of us were taught to think about it, the brain was described as reactive. Something happened, the brain receives the signal, the brain responds, like a very sophisticated answering service. But researchers, particularly in fields like neuroscience and cognitive science, have increasingly found that this picture is incomplete. The brain doesn't just react, it predicts constantly, every single second. It's running a continuously, largely unconscious simulation of the world and of your body's place in it before anything has actually happened. Now here is why this matters. Prediction takes resources. It takes energy. And prediction is shaped by experience, by what's happened before, by what the brain has learned to expect. So if you've been through a period of high stress, the brain logs that. If you've been through illness, the brain logs that. If your body has spent a long period of time working really hard just to keep things stable, the brain begins to predict that the world is demanding and that the body may not have enough resources. And this is the really important part. A prediction isn't always conscious. You don't sit there and decide, oh, I think today will be exhausting. The brain's already run that calculation based on history, based on what's been happening inside the body, based on 1,000 signals you haven't consciously registered. And it may have already begun to respond accordingly. This isn't imagination, it's biology. Right, this is how I tend to think about it. You know, Google Maps. When you put in a destination, it doesn't wait until you hit a traffic jam to tell you there's a problem. It already knows. So we were driving back from Chester yesterday and we could see there'd been 2 crashes and all the traffic was backing up. It's taken all the available data, the traffic patterns, the time of day, roadworks, previous journeys, and it's predicted where the bottleneck is going to be before you even arrive there. Your brain does something remarkably similar. It's not waiting for the pain signal to arrive before it responds. It's already anticipating, based on everything it knows, whether the next part of the day is likely to be costly, and then it starts preparing. Sometimes that preparation looks like fatigue. Sometimes it looks like pain. Sometimes it looks like that muddy feeling of not being able to get started, which is genuinely frustrating. When you want to do something and your body simply won't cooperate. Your brain is trying in the only way that it knows how to protect you. The question is whether its predictions are still accurate or whether they're running on old information. And of course, unlike Google Maps and the prediction of the traffic, you can't just turn off on a slip road. Now I want to introduce you to something called interoception. It's a word that sounds far more complicated than it is. Interoception is simply your body's internal messaging system. Inside your body right now, there are thousands of signals travelling every second. Hungry, tired, cold, calm. Like tight across the shoulders, heart rate slightly elevated, Stomach, uneasy. Energy, low. Now these signals are being sent continuously from your organs, your muscles, your gut, your heart, up to your brain. Your brain receives them, interprets them, and decides how to respond. Now imagine your body is sending text messages. Your stomach sends a text. I need food soon. Your muscles send a text. Oh, we've been tense for 3 hours. Your nervous system sends a text. Something feels slightly off. Your heart sends a text. Rate is elevated. And your brain, like a very overworked manager, is reading all of these all of the time and deciding what to do. Now, most of the time this works seamlessly. You feel hungry and you eat, sorted. You feel cold, you put on a jumper, simple. But sometimes, and this is where it gets interesting, the messaging system gets mixed up, like the circle of doom when the internet is low, or the brain starts misreading the messages, or the brain has learned, quite understandably, based on experience, to turn the volume up on certain signals, because it's decided that those signals are important. And when that happens, what arrives in your conscious awareness may feel overwhelming. Pain that doesn't have an obvious source. Exhaustion that doesn't respond to rest. Sensory overwhelm in environments that look to everyone else perfectly manageable. Not because you're inventing it, because the internal messaging volume is turned up. Now, some people's internal messaging systems are naturally more sensitive than others. It's a variation in how our nervous systems are built and how they've adapted over time. There's a growing body of research around what some researchers call sensory processing sensitivity. The idea that some nervous systems take in and process more information more deeply than others. For some people, particularly those who are neurodivergent, the nervous system may process sensory information and internal signals differently. And for others, the filtering system has been shaped by experience. Think about what happens when someone spends years in an environment where they need to walk on eggshells, where they need to read the room, where they needed to anticipate what was coming next, and where they needed to manage uncertainty, their own and other people's. The brain is an extraordinarily good learner. It adapts to what life asks it to do. If life has asked your brain to be vigilant, to pick up signals that others might miss, to process the environment quickly, your brain will have become very, very good at that, and it'll have stayed good at it, even in environments where that level of vigilance isn't needed anymore. Because brains don't switch off what they've learned just because circumstances have changed. They need to learn slowly, safely, that things are different now. Which means, and I really want you to take this in, if your nervous system feels fraught, feels loud, if you feel more than other people seem to, and if the world sometimes feels like too much, That's not a signal that something has gone wrong with you. It's a sign that your brain has been doing exactly what brains do: learning, adapting, protecting. In the next video, we're going to talk about energy, specifically why the body's energy system can become overloaded. If you want to make sure that you see that one, please subscribe now. It's free and you can always change your mind. And I'll see you in part 3.